My name is Travis Sales. I'm a staff engineer, senior product specialist. I was one of the original principals at ThinStall, which is the company VMware bought now 4 years ago. And you, my friends, are the fifth column. You are the elite. They always say ThinApp is like the best kept secret in the company. I hear that over and over again. So I always call the vice president of the business unit. I say, well, why are you keeping it a secret? Right? That's stupid. ThinApp can do so much. The fact that you're here and you're interested gives me faith, right? Because vSphere, vCenter, all that cool stuff we've got, that gets all the attention, all the glory. But right here is where we actually get a lot of stuff done. So, with that, I also wanted to make a quick note that there are 2 microphones. If you want to just scream at me a question at some point, feel free to, at any point. I don't care, right? Can't offend me, except for Mike. And see, now you're regretting you showed up this morning, aren't you, man? But I also wanted to make a quick shout out for another session that's actually going on right now, which probably pulled a lot of people away. Let's always do 2 ThinApp sessions at the same time, right? But for those of you who might be interested, where the heck is it? Here it is. It's euc1226. I don't know when it's going to be replaying. I know it will be, but that's our Project Horizon. It's managing ThinApps with the Horizon Application Manager. And that's something new that's coming out this year. And they're doing full demos of the thing. So if you can follow up and go see 2871. Yeah. That's right. They're hands-on lab. Give that a try. I haven't done it yet, but then again, I've messed with the stuff for a while, so I don't think they let me in there. Normal disclaimer. Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to lie to you for the next hour. You're not going to really be able to repeat any of this, standard stuff. Anything I say can't be held against me. Pretty much what that's for. So what we're going to do today is we're going to cover some basics, right? For those of you who know me, who've heard me talk, or you heard my session last year, I talk a lot about process and logic, but I'm not going to get all academic on you. We're actually going to focus a little bit more on a particular case study, specifically dealing with an application porting to Windows 7, because I thought last year that's when all of this would have happened. Turned out that most people waited, and then this year has just been absolutely insane with it. So we're going to use that as our case study. We're going to walk through that. So again, questions, just throw your hand up or go one of the mics and just let me know what it is. Another thing, I got a lot of detail in these slides, and for those of you who have also seen me present, you know I hate slides. But this is what they made me do. So I just poured like insane amounts of stuff in there so the people who had to review it were like, God, Travis, what are you doing? So these will be available to you. I put a lot of notes in the notes section. So if you're half awake, this guy over here is still drunk, right? You can download this later on and you can read it and figure stuff out. Don't laugh, man. You know what I'm talking about. So troubleshooting, again, to level set everybody, is a systematic, logical process, right? And the goal for us is to find the root cause. Don't treat the symptoms. If somebody's bleeding, don't put a Band-Aid on it, because the likelihood is that it's a gunshot wound, right? You got to fix the root problem here. And too many people, when they're looking at ThinApp troubleshooting, are glossing over the top. They're just looking at what the symptom is and not drilling down past that to find out what the root cause is. And that's exactly how you solve issues when you're trying to ThinApp something. And again, lots of extraneous detail. I love Wikipedia. Thank you. So we're going to go through just a couple of quick commandments. And you've heard me talk about my ThinApp commandments. If you haven't, just ask me later. I'll give it to you. There's 7 of them. They're pretty cool. But I've got to come up with some new ones for troubleshooting. And probably the most important one is know your environment. And this goes back to commandment number 1 of ThinApp, which is know thy app. If you don't know your app, you don't know your environment, then you're like, what are you going to do? It's like you got on a plane, you went to Las Vegas, you stepped out, you didn't have a plan, you didn't know where you were going. I mean, you're lost, right? The same thing when you're troubleshooting. Also, document your changes. And I don't mean document like sit down and write up a document, right? Up here, think about logically what's going on when you work with an application and the changes that occur. Listen to your users. I can't tell you how many times I get a call and someone's like, hey, I'm trying to do Office. I'm like, okay, what's the problem? He's like, oh, it doesn't work. Great. Oh, that's no problem. I know what that is. That's no problem. You got to really listen to your users and find out what they're saying, because it could be that it has nothing to do with ThinApp or the application. Maybe it's something environmental. Maybe it's them. They're users. We know how they work or don't work. When you're doing your research, be wary of the web. There's a lot of great information out there. Our forum, I mean, this is a community. The fact that you guys are here, this is a community when it comes to ThinApp. We actually rely on each other. The forum is a great place to go ask questions, find information, and get research, as well as just the web in general, but always take it with a grain of salt. And if you go to the forum and you ask a question, don't be that guy. Oh, I was trying to do this. Really, what happened? Oh, I got an error. Don't be that guy. I won't respond to it. Nobody will respond to it. But you have to research. You have to go out and you have to find information. And the case study that I'm about to walk through with you really gets into that. And you can see how ThinApping stuff and resolving the problem sometimes isn't knowing ThinApp. It's knowing the application itself. We have to define what our problem is. That goes back to our root cause, right? We have to figure out what's actually happening, not the symptom. The symptom is just a clue. The root cause that the symptom is referring to. We have to be able to reproduce that problem. If you can't reproduce it, and for anybody who calls support, opens up a ticket with us on a problem that you have with an application, the first thing they're going to want to do, besides sending you to 100 KB articles and asking, did you read this? Did you do that? Right? We've all experienced it. Is they're going to want to reproduce the problem. Especially if it escalates to my level or escalates to development. If we can't repo the problem, it's not my problem. Right? It's an environmental thing. And then we have to break down the problem into its components, and we're going to do that during the case study as well, to eliminate the things that don't matter. And you'll get a lot of false positives, and you're going to want to brush those off, and you want to focus on the things that actually do matter to your problem at hand. And again, researching the problem, using your favorite tools to do that, just to get more information. I actually think that was, yeah, look at that. Research the solution, research the problem. Whoops. You want to identify the component, then you want to come up with a plan to test that. And we're going to do that, obviously, in the case study as well. All of this is just noise, though. Right? These are common sense things. We should be doing these things. If you're not doing these things, then you need to slap yourself up the side of the head. Because this is basics. That's why I called this section basics. All right? So, everybody does this, right? Everybody does this, right? Nobody does this? Wow. Because you're all out with that guy last night. But it's not that simple. Okay? Applications are variables. Applications have lots of moving parts. Those are all variables. The problem with ThinApping an application isn't the ThinApp component itself. It's the variable. And that's where we have to focus our attention at. And that's going to be the biggest problem, because nothing is the same. Every application that I have to look at is different from the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Until I walk in apps and I'm like, I've never seen this, I don't know what it does. So the first thing I have to do is ask those questions. What is this application trying to accomplish? And then when I know that, and I'm able to start going through the process, okay? Process. If you don't have a process, then you're shooting blind. You have to have something reproducible. Something you step through. I'm going to give you my process, but if you don't have one, shame on you. My process is very simple. I call it dirty, washed, clean production. Now, if an application just works out of the box, fantastic. What do I care, right? It works. And about 70% of the applications I touch work. Out of the remaining 30%, about 25% of those require some finagling, some massaging, right? A little isolation mode here, a little package INI setting there. Fine. That's what this troubleshooting process is for. And the remaining 5%, well, those are just stupid things that are just never going to work, and either we have to fix it or it's just never going to work. So, knowing that, you can start narrowing what you do when you package your ThinApps. This is my process. The dirty test. I've got a machine that I'm capturing an application on. I run my pre-scan, I install my app, I run my post-scan, I run a build. The application's still installed. I ran the application, so I know it works. And believe me, run the app before you do a post-scan. Because if the application doesn't work, guess what? When you virtualize it, it's not going to work. And I can't tell you how many times I run into that one. So run the application, make sure it works, do your post scan, do a build, run the ThinApp right there. The reason I call it a dirty test is because the application's locally installed, and I know it works. And if I've got an application packaged on the same machine that I just did and it doesn't work, then I've got something very fundamentally wrong. It's probably code related. Maybe a hardcore package INI setting or actually something in our code. And that's a big red flag for me. But the dirty test will let you know that. The wash test is a confirmation, and a lot of people do washed and clean. They kind of interchange the two. Mike, did you ever do a washed or clean? Both? You did both? Okay. A lot of people will just choose the clean test, but for me, a wash test, specifically when I'm troubleshooting, is I'm on that same machine, right? I just captured it, I just ran it, it worked. Great. Let me just go to add remove programs and uninstall. Is that a real uninstall? No. We always know it leaves stuff behind, right? You know, God only knows what the application installed. But it does remove enough that if I then go run the ThinApp again and it fails, what does that tell me? It tells me I just uninstalled something that's now no longer in the ThinApp. There's a relationship, right? Little logical steps. Or it's something that was in the ThinApp, but for some reason isn't working properly because maybe it's not registered with the desktop anymore. A clean test is essentially the same thing, except I snapshot my capture machine back to clean and I run the ThinApp. So it's similar in nature, but if I pass a wash test and I snap the machine back and I run it again and it works, that's just sort of a reconfirmation for me. Making sure that anything that really was not uninstalled is gone. And then, of course, there's the production test, which is take the thing, put it on one of your production machines. I recently dealt with a call with Joint Forces Command, the Special Forces guys, and he was packaging Visio in Project 2010. He's like, I package it up, it works great. I put it out on one of my production machines, opens up, closes. And he's like, I don't understand what's going on. I did it right. I said, okay, well, if it works when you capture it, but it doesn't in production, it's typically environmental. Turns out he had Office 2010 Standard locally installed. So with the Office Protection Service locally installed, that's what was communicating to his KMS server for licensing. When he captured his ThinApp, he did it in a clean environment, like he's always been told, which captured the service. So when he tried to run the ThinApp, it tried to run a service that conflicted with the one that was already on the machine, as far as the communication back to the KMS server, not the actual components. So it didn't get a license and it just closed. So production tests will give you environmental clues if there's something going on. So those are my 4 tests. You can use these, come up with your own, but have something, right? Because not having anything is bad, because you're not going to be able to reproduce your steps. And if you can't reproduce your steps logically and consistently, or as I used to say, a uniform, consistent, and reproducible result, then your variables and your results of your testing are inconclusive. So let's take the idea of an application. Let's apply the sort of commandments we've got on looking for root cause, walking through these steps, and then testing an application to try to figure it out. Before we do that, though, does anybody have any questions? How many people here, when they troubleshoot an application, have a process they go through? A consistent one? A few of you? Great. For those of you who didn't raise your hand, get one. Use mine, do something. If you just shoot blind, you're going to end up on the phone with support, and they're going to force you into something after they go ask you to go read a bunch of KB articles. And it's interesting to also note that troubleshooting a ThinApp, a lot of people in the marketing group hate when I talk, because I always say it's more of an art than a science. And they say, well, don't say that because that makes it sound hard. I'm like, no, it's not that it's hard. It's just experience, right? You've got to have some stick time in order to be really good. A friend of mine was telling me a great story where he was at a cardiologist to have a procedure done, and he was worried about it. So he's asking all these questions, and the cardiologist stopped him and said, hey, relax. You could learn how to do this in 2 weeks. I could teach you. And you could learn in 2 weeks how to do this procedure. It's that simple. He's like, oh, I feel better. He's like, yeah, well, don't, because if something goes wrong, it takes 20 years to learn, right? And it's a really good point. The steps we go through are simple. It's knowing what to do when something goes wrong. That takes some experience and some time. So let's jump into our case study. And this is a real one with a very large company. And I won't name them because they would think, oh, don't use me, I sound stupid. But I won't say their name. But anyway, they were making their Win 7 migration. And he calls me and he says, I got to run net meeting. So I picked up the phone off the floor, right? And I said, what? Why? Why? I bolded that one. I found the bold key on PowerPoint. Why? When you talk about Win 7 migrations, and believe me, this is where I'm starting to get a lot more questions around issues, because people are trying to port to Win 7. So what do they think? Oh, well, I'm going to ThinApp the applications that don't work. That's not a panacea. It's not a guarantee. ThinApping an application doesn't guarantee it's going to work on Windows 7 if it doesn't work in Windows 7. You can try it. And this case study is an example of one way that it did work. But don't ever go in thinking it's a guarantee, because it's not. Remember, ThinApp is a set of tools. It's like a big toolbox in your garage, and there's about 120 tools in there. And you've got to know what those tools do, and you've got to know how to use them. Because if you don't, you're going to try to change a light bulb with a power saw, right? Because you don't understand the tools. But the first thing I always do is I always ask the question, why? Yeah. Because you have to go back to the fundamental question of know thy app. Why doesn't it run on Windows 7 to begin with? If I have NetMeeting, and this is what we're going to go through with this example. NetMeeting doesn't work on Windows 7. Why? What's the root cause? You've got to understand the root cause. Now, what if it was that NetMeeting looked at the OS and said, what version are you? And if it returns anything other than XP, it doesn't run. I can't virtualize that. Now, we have products that virtualize the OS, right? Lots of that. But if it's that, I can't do anything about it. So just because we can put things into a bubble and they can run doesn't necessarily mean that that's the problem we're going to solve. Not to mention it could be components and things that just don't exist anymore. NetDDE. How many are familiar with NetDDE service back in XP? One. You see, there's always one, right? And so NetDDE is a way you could always take an Excel spreadsheet, right, and have it talk to some server using NetDDE, and it would do like this live updating thing. I live in Houston, and we have a lot of oil and gas companies, as you can imagine, and they love that. And then they came to me and they said, well, we went to Windows 7 and the NetDDE service doesn't work anymore. I'm like, right, it doesn't exist anymore. I can't virtualize something that doesn't exist anymore as a service of the operating system. I mean, the stuff just isn't there. So I always ask the question when it comes to Win 7 stuff, why are you doing it? Why are you running NetMeeting? Now, typically it's a stopgap, and I always tell people if you're bringing something forward that doesn't natively run, you've got to ask this question because you've got some issues. Number one, is your vendor going to support you? Microsoft doesn't support NetMeeting. Never did, right? So who cares? If you can get it to work, great. But if you've got a large line of business application that's not natively compatible with an OS, and you virtualize it to make it run on that OS, Win 7 in this case, they may not support you. So you have to ask the question, is it worth doing? Do you have a question? You've got to ask yourself, am I all right doing this? Because if you pick up the phone, they're not going to help you. I'll help you. Well, somebody will help you. Only a few people have my email. But you've got to ask that fundamental problem or question because it is a red flag. So let's define the problem we have. Customer says, all right, I got to run NetMeeting on Windows 7. Doesn't work. That's what he called and told me. It's like, great, here we go. Don't be that guy again. Please don't be that guy. He's going to be moving to live meeting or whatever the latest thing is, right? But he's like, I got to run this for now. I was like, okay, cool. I don't have a clue how NetMeeting works. I mean, I know how it works, right? But under the hood, it's like I know how to drive a car, but if you ask me to go change an alternator, forget it. I'm going to break your car. I don't have a clue. So I had to figure out how this thing operated to begin with to figure out what the problem was. They also had issues. I asked them some more questions, right? I said, what are you trying to do? Well, it works on XP. We tried it on Vista, but that really didn't work. And now we're on Win 7, and we're trying to avoid a lot of the same issues. So I had to get a feel for what he was trying to accomplish before we could move forward. So basically, it was make this work on Win 7, period. So I took the installer from him, and I ran it, and got the exact same thing he got, which is the lovely compatibility thing, right? And then it crashes after that. It just doesn't do anything. Okay, well, that was easy. A lot of reproduction of issues are a lot more complex, especially if you're dealing with 5 gig applications that have got 100 components, and you've got to use magic fairy dust and whatnot to make them work. This was relatively straightforward. But I did get the exact same error message, which is good. And that's good from the perspective that as I move along, if I get something other than what they got, even though it still may not work, it's something different, right? I used to tell my wife, I said, 30 no's and a yes means yes, right? Something different. So I needed to break it down. And this is where I talk about thinking inside the app. I use things like Process Explorer. I use, at later stages, our log monitor tool. And they've asked me to do a session on log monitor. And I was like, that's more than an hour. Because frankly, in an hour's worth of time, you're only going to learn so much. But use your tool of choice. Process Explorer for me is key. Because it allows me to watch what happens. If you've ever used it, you know you can see processes start, you can see child processes start, maybe fall away. You can see things on the OS maybe start up and fall away. I've solved DCOM issues that way. But it's really a good insight. And it's also color-coded, right? So if something's .NET, it flashes up as yellow. So you know, oh, that was a .NET process that started, but I was never asked to install .NET. You can draw these little conclusions. So Process Explorer for me, that's it. But, a lot of guys are like, what about ProcMon? I'm like, I don't care about ProcMon. That goes so deep. We're still up here at the surface, right? Who cares about the registry calls right now? If the thing doesn't launch, that's not the problem. So I don't mess with those. Our log monitor, if you've ever messed with it, it tells you everything. It records API calls. And there are some things you can do, and we can probably talk about it because we're probably going to have time. But I can show that later. So break it down, figure out what's not working. Watch it. Sometimes I'll run the application a dozen times just watching what happens. Maybe I'll run it on XP, maybe I'll run it on Win 7, maybe I'll run it on Vista, who knows. 2003 server, 64-bit Windows versus 32-bit Windows because of the program files, x86 folder, stuff like that. Then we need to eliminate. We've gathered some information, we've watched it. Now we need to start eliminating what doesn't make sense, right? Does he have white hair? Does he have a mustache? Is he wearing a hat, right? Get rid of the stuff that you know is garbage. During the net meeting, I didn't see anything else installed with the application, right? So I knew there wasn't any kind of weird prereq, like a VC++ runtime library, C++ runtime or .NET or something stupid. I also know it didn't have anything to do with audio-video drivers because it didn't really install anything. I know it uses the local OS for that. And because the ThinApp of it works fine on XP, I can conclude that it's using the Windows stuff for that, so that's really not the issue either. So having gone through all of my watching and so forth, I can say, okay, well, this is pretty fundamental. It's the OS. It's not anything the app is installing. So I started to research the problem. Went to the web. First off, let me go find out information about just .NET in general. Just go look at Microsoft KBs, things like that. I chased a lot of dead ends. I found a lot of websites. I found a lot of forum conversations. I mean, just tons of extraneous stuff. But what it really kind of came down to is that everybody talked about trying to run it in compatibility mode. I was like, what? When you right mouse click on a process and you go down to properties and you can choose compatibility. I'm like, okay, but those really dealt with Vista. They really didn't deal with Win 7. Interesting, but not really relevant for me. I did find some old articles about a possible fix for Vista for .NET, or for NetMeeting. That was interesting. But what I was really left with was thin. Really thin. But that second thing kind of piqued my curiosity, right? Why would they release something specifically for Vista? So I went and tried to go look that up in Microsoft. Guess what? They took the KB down, right? Because they don't support the product anymore. It's dead. I'm like, well, that sucks. So I went to Web Archive, right? And I punched in the KB article path in Web Archive because I was looking at a forum posting. A guy put a link in to the actual KB. So I dumped that in Web Archive, and guess what? I was able to see it. Aha. Using the web to my advantage. And I read the article. Well, apparently, NetMeeting had a maintenance release for Vista because there were compatibility problems. I was like, well, that's cool. I wonder why, right? And then it also listed off all these things that no longer work. That was also very cool. Because if I get this to work, and Microsoft said, back in Vista, all these things, these functionality things no longer will work, well, odds are they're not going to work in Win 7 either, right? So I made a note of that. So that when I did give this back and a customer tried it, he was like, well, this isn't working. I'm like, right, see? Microsoft said that doesn't work anymore. Not my fault. You'll run into that. So the more information you can get. And of course, I also had to go find some archive of the MSI to download for that version because you can't get it from Microsoft anymore. So it really was, I'll tell you, it was about a full day of research to get all this. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't need. And people ask me, well, how long should it take me to remediate a problem with ThinApp? And our PSO team's got these criteria and all these things you can go through to make eliminations, and so many hours for this and so many hours for that. I've worked on some applications for 3 months. 3 months to get it working. Because it was that important, it was that difficult. And then on others, I've done it in a couple hours. It's totally subjective. The app, the problem, and your environment. So I went and I found this NetMeeting 3.02 installer. And now I wanted more details around that, right? So I did the Web Archive thing and I looked up the old KB. Very eye-opening. I said, okay, well, let me go give this one a whirl. So I went and ran this, and guess what it said? It said it's currently supported only on Vista. Because I tried to run it on XP because I was doing all my captures on XP still, right? I was like, well, that's cool. I can't capture on XP anymore. I've got to capture on Vista because apparently the latest version of this thing that had fixes in it that I'm going to try to use only works with Vista. So scrapped my XP machine, went to Vista, ran this again. So I started my process, right, on Vista. Dirty test, wash test, clean test, production. So I went through it, and I used a clean Vista machine, the 302 that I had found, the one they wrote for it, and did my test, and it worked as expected, right? The native install worked on Vista. Awesome. I've moved up an OS version. And it worked as a ThinApp on that platform. Something different than what I originally started with, right? Now, during that process, I got this coming out of our GUI, where it said, hey, there's a component here that I don't support. MNMDD. And it wasn't supported. Well, how cryptic is that? I don't know what MNMDD is, so I had to go look that up, right? Come to find out it was some multimedia redirection component thing for desktop sharing, which I didn't know NetMeeting could do because I've never used it. Well, who cares? Because I went back to that KB article I found, and it said, oh yeah, this doesn't work anymore, right? For this 302 on Vista natively, that's broke. We're not supporting that. So I don't care about this. Doesn't bother me. I don't need this driver. So it was a benign issue for me. So I went and I did my wash test. Again, optional. It's up to you if you want to do a washed or a clean. And since I already know that my problem really is with the OS, with Win 7 on this thing, and not with ThinApp, then I was pretty confident that I was going to get a positive result. And this kind of goes back into that hypothesis, scientific method thought process. Form a hypothesis, conduct a test, because your hypothesis, you're going to come up with potential outcomes, and then based on your test, which outcome did you get? Or did you get something you didn't think you would get? Because that would lead you into what your next hypothesis and your next test is, right? So I kind of knew it would work, and sure enough, it did. So I was really happy with that. So I did the clean test just out of sake of argument. Worked great. Fantastic. So I did my production test, and my production test obviously is Windows 7. doing all my other testing on Vista, so I went to Windows 7. And during the production test, I got an error message. A different one than I originally got with the XP version that I've been testing. So again, it's a negative, but for me it was a positive because it was something new. And if you look at the error message, again, kind of cryptic, but it says that there's this MST120.dll talking to this msam-in1 DLL at some really bizarre string and doesn't work. However, the primary clue that I came out of with this is that it's trying to talk to a DLL. Whenever you see things like this, it's one DLL trying to talk to another. So what's the first thing you should go do? What's that? Make sure it's there. You got it. Go see if it's there. But also, compare it to your baseline. Remember, I'm in production, so this is my real world. My capture world is my make-believe world, right? It's where I got things working, and that was Vista. So I need to go make sure these two DLLs exist, and I also need to go compare the versions. Because, again, we're moving up in OS, so we also know DLLs are going to change. So I did that. Guess what I found? Hey, it's different. It was there, but it was a different version. Okay. Well, this comes back to your question. This is where this actually solved the problem. That particular DLL, in this case MSASN1 DLL, was of a different version of Windows 7 than it was inside of Vista. And because I know this is some sort of import, and an import is an API call, then I know it's not communicating properly with it. So what I did is I took the older DLL, put it into the package, and of course we all know that if I put something into the package, the virtual application in the bubble will load that to memory and it will see that one regardless of what's on the OS. So if that was in fact my problem, because again I'm dealing with these symptoms, then it should work because it'll load that DLL over the system's version of it. And guess what? It did. And guess what? NetMeeting ran. Holy cow. That was great. You know, it was that simple at the end of the day. Now, granted, this whole process here probably took me 2 days to figure out. So 2 days of work led to copy this file into that folder. All right? And I can't tell you how many times I feel stupid when I'm done troubleshooting something, because it always turns out to be something minor, something small. But it's how we got there, right? Because had I not gone through the research, I never would have discovered that 3.02 version. Had I not gone and packaged it on Vista, knowing that I had to and knowing that there were new limitations, all these things I would never have had I just sort of arbitrarily tried stuff. So you have to have a consistent workflow in order to figure out what's going on. And of course, for this customer, he was overjoyed. He's like, great, man, we can run NetMeeting. Of course, the functionality problems that I discovered in that old KB article that I had to go pull out of archive, I gave to him and said, yeah, you can run it, but guess what? None of this works. He's like, oh, well, I need that to work. I can't do that. At some point, if an application isn't ever going to do it, there's nothing you can do, right? That's in the app itself. So he had to live with that fact, but we did get this to work on Windows 7. A lot of other things you're going to discover as you start porting things over for Win 7 are going to be prereqs. I didn't have any in this particular case, but I wanted to bring a couple of them up to discuss real quick. We all know that .NET 3.5 is installed with Windows 7. Microsoft says that it also includes the libraries that are, historical, right? So that you don't need to have 2 or 1.1. They take care of that for you. No. And that's because commandment number 2 of ThinApp is we expose bad programming. And developers are 20-somethings living in their mama's basement eating Cheetos and drinking Coke at 2 in the morning who have a deadline by 8, and they're going to take some shortcuts. They're going to hard code paths, and they're going to do things that, a real development shop probably wouldn't do. So you will find that you will have to package a lot of prereqs to make Win 7 application compatibility work for you. .NET 1.1, .NET 2, 2.5, variations of that. So don't be surprised if you find yourself dealing with that. So a lot of the conclusions that we can come up with here is that it does take time. So don't think you're going to just rush in, walk through some little magical process and out the end, there's a working ThinApp. You've got to really put a little time into this process and think about it. Anything you put in up front will go a long way in the end, and I really mean that, truly, because again, this is experience. I can teach you to do something, that heart procedure in 2 weeks, but if something goes wrong, that's experience. And this is where sharing your experiences on the forum really helps out. So the more we all participate there, the better we get at it. Now we're starting to do things with ThinApp that you're going to start seeing. We're going to have some pretty interesting revelations during the keynotes. So be sure, especially tomorrow's keynote with Scott Davis and Steve Herod. Please go to that one. You're going to see a new project coming from us that'll blow your mind. And I'll put it to this way. It was the first time I've been able to use the words iPad and ThinApp in the same sentence. So if you want to see something cool, go to tomorrow's keynote. Follow that testing. The red flags. Those red flags doesn't natively work on Win7 to begin with. That's a supportability flag in my head. Application is fundamentally incompatible. Before I say this, anybody here from Australia? Really? Don't lie to me. Nobody? So the Australian banking system loves their 16-bit applications. 16-bit DOS applications. They've got hundreds of them. I don't know why. But they started going to Win7 64-bit. And I'm starting getting calls at like when you went to bed, right? That early. Hey man, we're trying to run this stuff and it's not working. And we ThinApped it. I'm like, it's a 16-bit DOS app. Right, but it's Windows. Windows 64-bit. I don't have the ability to bend the time-space continuum with my mind, right? 16-bit applications structurally don't work with 64-bit processors. Ever. Right? But DOSBox, which is a 32-bit DOS emulator, does ThinApp and work on 64-bit. So if I put my 16-bit DOS app into DOSBox and I ThinApp it, then can I run it and make it work on a 64-bit Windows system? Yes. So I didn't want to tell them that. I actually wanted to just kind of smack them around for a little bit for being stupid, but I ended up giving that up. But those are red flags, right? At some point, you just don't want to do it. And there's a lot of Win7 projects that I know everyone's going through, and you're looking at remediation of applications. IE6, how many have IE6 requirements? Anybody? Whew. And they said it was dead. Not. And you all know we've got the ability to virtualize IE6, put that on Win7. The reason we can do that is we have this little technology under the hood called a template. And the template is a text file that actually defines all the files and registries needed for IE6. Now what's kind of cool is that template exists in the ThinApp setup capture. In fact, if you ever wanted to go look at it, a little trick for you. Launch Log Monitor, okay, because that's a ThinApp. It's in the same package. Go down to the bottom, click the Browse button for like one of the places that you would export your log to, and then just browse the directory structure under C program files, right, to find ThinApp. And then you'll see all of our bits and pieces, right? This is how people used to hack the little pop-up screen. Turn that off or change the look of it because they found the bitmap and they could put whatever they want. We fixed that, by the way. You can't do that. But you'll find a templates folder. And in that templates folder, you'll find this text file for IE6. And you can just copy that onto your desktop, right? Because that's set for merge mode. And you can look at it. In fact, I've actually taken the template file and have overwritten it with folders and registry values for an application that I understood. Wrote that back in. And even though all the buttons say IE6, I was able to suck that application right out of the OS without having to install it. And I started playing with that, and we started opening up the idea that this is what we might start doing. I wanted to query the crowd in my session because if we gave the ability to, we record what happens between the scans, right? So we can create these templates, these text files, and then we can share these text files. This would give you the ability to basically say, oh, I need Office, and it's already installed, and just sucks it out, like sucks its brain out, right? It makes a ThinApp. No captures, no nothing. All the logic and all the nuances written into this little template. Does that sound interesting? Yeah? Okay. Does anybody think that's dumb? That's really what I want to know. No? Okay. That's good. Well, I'm glad, because this is some of the stuff we're starting to mess with, and your feedback for my team, for the ThinApp team, is really important, because we're like the only group in the company where this is how we develop, right? This is how we figure stuff out. And for those of you who have heard about the ThinApp, how many have heard about ThinApp Factory? A few of you? Okay, cool. Were you on the Friends and Family, Mike? No? Okay. Was anybody on our Friends and Family beta for App Factory that's here? No? So for those of you who don't know what App Factory is, you're going to see it this week as well. We don't have a lab on it. No, wait. We do? We do? Really? This is why this book is useless. I didn't even know we had a lab on it. Well, ThinApp Factory is an appliance, just so you know, that you will install into your virtual infrastructure. And it will read an RSS feed. We've got several that are set up for demos. One of them goes to ninite.com, which is a great website for just grabbing a bunch of freeware, clicking one button, and it installs all the stuff. But what Factory is supposed to do for you is allow the appliance to go someplace, find installers, bring them down, spin up virtual capture machines, do all of the work for you, and spit all that out as ThinApps, and you're doing everything within a web UI. And you can see what's going on, and here are your applications, and you can publish these applications out, right, to a web portal that's built in, publish them out to your SCCM, publish them into Horizon. But the whole idea is that this becomes the thing that does all your packaging for you. Now, granted, there are some limitations as far as silent installers and whatnot. And there's a manual mode. And there's now a GUI in that for looking at the file system and the registry through a graphical interface. But the whole idea is that this is going to be a complete web interface. So all your ThinApp work starts happening behind it. So go do the lab for it, because I think you'll be pretty impressed. Doesn't help us when something goes wrong, right? Again, this is that whole, I can teach you to do something in 2 weeks. But if something goes wrong, be prepared to go through what we just did, right? It's not going to solve that. But the template stuff is something we're looking to incorporate in there. So I wanted to put that out. And if we can manage it, we were wanting to put it in Capacity Planner as well. Anybody use Capacity Planner for desktop? No? Okay, a few? Cool. How cool would it be if Capacity Planner could go into your environment, see all your applications, compare that against a list of templates you have, and then you can say, oh, look, you have these 50 apps, and look, you have these 20 templates for them. Do you want me to go out into your network and just grab them and ThinApp them? And you go click, 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 go. And then it goes out and just harvests them. We call it V-harvesting internally. So if you've got things that you think are like that or cool, let us know. Post it on the forum. Our developers, our product managers, we go out there and we read those. That's how we figure out what to do, because honestly, we're not that smart. You know, the way we figure out stuff sometimes is sit around with a bottle of scotch in the evening and just kind of make stuff up, which is why we get some weird seizure settings. But if you tell us what you need, we'll put that into the roadmap. And it's not like vSphere and stuff where you got to go through all this massive hierarchy, executive briefing, blah, blah, blah. Nah, it's like talking to me. We're talking to our PM Kobe. And that's how we get stuff done. Use the tools that you're obviously most comfortable with. Ones that make sense for you. Just another little tip. Good troubleshooting equals experience, right? The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. The more you research, the more you listen to other people do it, the better you're going to get at it. Is there a class you can take on this? No. Are you going to be experts walking out of here? No. You just got to keep banging away at it. I didn't get to know this stuff the way I did simply by reading a book. Years of playing with the product, right? Years of messing with applications is how I got to understand a lot of these nuances. We are looking at creating some web stuff, though, within our team, and I also wanted to query the group. I'm going to do it Wednesday as well in that session. How many of you would find it advantageous if you had a weekly or a monthly, I don't want to phrase it, but a call-in show? right? Call with your problem. Ask questions of an expert, right? How many, raise a hand, how many would use something like that? Kind of like the old ThinApp Lounge, except it would be live. We would take calls. We would answer questions. So that's pretty interesting to most? Okay. How many would find a roadshow through a VMUG for really getting under the hood, like a half-day troubleshooting thing through one of the VMUGs in your local area? Show of hands who would like to see that with ThinApp. Awesome, because Jean, who runs the VMUGs, is actually here with her board, and I'm going to put that in front of her. Does anybody have anything that they would like to see from us in this respect? Or is there anything that you'd like me to take back to my teams, product teams? So you all know we had that quality reporting thing in Setup Capture. How many of you turns that on? I knew it. See, I told them when they put that thing out, I said, no one's going to do that. No one wants to send information back to us. You know what we get? We actually do collect information from that. You know where it comes from? Torrents, wars, hackers, right? They don't break our code. They just, got a license, right? And they're making ThinApps and putting them out there, and they leave that turned on because they're idiots. So when you go look at our reports, it's all coming in from the hacker community, which is awesome, right? I don't know how many keyloggers ThinApp-wise I can do. It's like 1 million. So that was the original goal of that quality reporting issue, was to see who was ThinApping what anonymously, and generate that into something. And it was colossally stupid. But what's interesting, I'm glad you brought that up, is we actually have an internal site that we use amongst ourselves, the development team, where we actually have a lot of information in this regard. Now, it's only stuff we get. So it's really hard for us to put together something conclusive because, again, how many millions of applications exist? We don't see them all. We only see ones that don't work. So I think that that's a good point, and I know our PSO group, in fact, I think they have a session in here somewhere. Ray Dussault, my learned colleague in our PSO group, has got one going on where they're responsible for doing a lot of that. We have a group inside the company now called our Center of Excellence. And their whole goal is to put things like that together. So I'll be taking that back to them, so just for your benefit. And if you find that session, holler out the number on it. I know you're looking it up. This guy over here is still asleep. He's still drunk. I'll write it down for you. Don't worry. Yeah, so let's see. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm right on time. Does anybody have anything else that you'd like me to take back to the team? Really, this is a unique opportunity for you guys to get what you want or what you want to see done right in front of our developers. Mike. Yeah, in a way. So shell extensions are essentially two things. They're registry values, and sometimes they're components. Now, we had a blog. Did you see Heath's blog? I saw it, but it's all right. It's all doing it through the MSI. Right. Like a scripting component. Okay. I think that's viable. I think it's definitely something we were looking at doing. I can tell you one thing we're contemplating and doing, and this is with the Horizon team. Thank you. At least she just held her hand up. Last time I did one of these, I was going through it, and there was a woman in the back, and she had this big number on a sign that said 5, and she just slowly held it up. I thought she was scoring me. I'm like, She's like 5. I'm like, I did better than that. So what do I do when I stop? She had a stop sign. She just holds that up. One of the things we're contemplating and doing with the Horizon team is, Horizon's going to have an agent that installs to do some deployments and management of applications. Because that's there, there's a unique opportunity for us to actually hook into it and maybe provide some kernel level ability. Shell extensions would definitely be part of that. Drivers could be part of that. So there's some forward-thinking stuff we're considering with Horizon because they're asking us to give them that capability since they're going to already be present on the device. So, but yeah, right now it's a little tricky, but that's something that I think is definitely doable. And for those of you who don't know, on the 25th, released 4.6.2 maintenance release. Bunch of IE6 fixes in it. IE9 support is in that one. We also got a new little splash screen that pops up. Not that that really gets anybody excited, but it looks different. But there's been some ThinReg improvements. And I know everybody complains about ThinReg. Not to mention we've got some startup and some runtime improvements. In fact, somebody emailed me Friday and said they saw a 30% increase in speed for Office 07 in their environment just by relinking it into 4.6.2. So we're definitely doing some improvements in speed. But the ThinReg stuff I thought was pretty cool because if you're doing ThinReg to a bunch of network shares, you always got the screen flash, right? Every time it ThinReg stuff, that's gone because we have a no desktop refresh. So what it does is it'll ThinReg everything and then it refreshes so that the screen shows all the icons and whatnot. So you're not going to get the screen pops anymore. It's also got recursive built in. And you can do exclusion. So now you can just point ThinReg. Instead of having to list a lot of places, you can just point ThinReg to a location, and it will recursively search all the thin apps in all the subfolders. And it'll do that for you automatically. There was also a couple of other little switches like DDE stuff, but that was really more around IE. And there was also some improvements in ThinDirect when it came to whitelisting and blacklisting and some feature sets there. So we've got a blog that they just fixed last night because somebody screwed it up. So you can go out to the website to blogs.vmware.com/EUC and you can go see the latest ThinApp one. You can go get 4.6.2 and play with that. Our next release is probably going to be October, and this is going to coincide with Horizon, and that's going to be the ThinApp support inside Horizon Application Manager. So definitely go check out that session whenever it's replayed, and we'll have a release then, and then we'll do some stuff next year. But right now, a lot of it is focused on app support, general fixes like that. If you go to the session tomorrow, you'll see the exciting stuff that I'm not going to give away. But again, I can use the words iPad and ThinApp together, which is totally cool. So go check that out. And if you've got any other questions, I'm going to hang out for a few minutes. If not, then thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the show.